Do you know the guy who founded Zoom? Mr. Eric Yuan, and he tried to get a US visa 9 times. Got rejected 8 times before one finally worked in 1997, and when he showed up in Silicon Valley, he could barely speak English. The reason he even wanted to move here in the first place is kind of sweet actually. He was in college in China, his girlfriend lived 10 hours away by train, and he just wanted a better way to see her face than waiting for holiday breaks. So he built himself some rough video calling software as a student. That was basically the seed of everything that came later. He ends up getting hired at this tiny video conferencing company called WebEx, one of their first engineers. Cisco buys WebEx in 2007, and Yuan becomes a VP there. Good job, good title, comfortable spot to stay. But he had this idea stuck in his head that Cisco didn't want to hear. He wanted to build a video calling tool that actually worked well on phones, back when everyone assumed you'd be sitting at a desk with a webcam. He pitched it to his bosses. They said no. He pitched a better version of it. They said no again. So he just left. Started his own thing in 2011. First called it SASB, which honestly sounds like a name someone picked in the elevator on the way to file the paperwork. Renamed it Zoom pretty quickly after. Now here's what people forget about Zoom's early years. It wasn't flashy. What made it good was actually really boring. It just worked. On bad hotel Wi-Fi, on old laptops, in situations where Skype would freeze up or WebEx itself would drop the call entirely. Nobody's writing headlines about the app that doesn't crash, but that's genuinely why people started sticking with it. Growth was normal for a while. Slow, steady, the kind of thing that takes years. 1 million users in the first year. Unicorn status by 2017. They go public in 2019, stock priced at $36, which is actually higher than they originally expected, meaning investors wanted in more than Zoom thought they would. And then March 2020 hits. I don't think people fully remember how insane the jump was. In December 2019, Zoom had about 10 million people using it daily. 4 months later, in April 2020, that number was 300 million. That's not just growth, that's a different universe. Schools that had never touched video conferencing were running full classes on it within days. Companies with zero remote work policy were suddenly doing everything through Zoom, meetings, client calls, even happy hours. People stopped saying, "Let's do a video call," and started, "Let's Zoom." It became a verb, same way Google did years before. For a few months, this scrappy little company that spent years quietly obsessing over bad Wi-Fi connections became maybe the single most important piece of software on the entire planet. But here's the thing about growing that fast, that publicly, in that short a window. It exposes stuff that a slower growing company would have had years to quietly fix. Zoom's security just wasn't built for the situation it suddenly found itself in. Meetings without passwords started getting hijacked by randoms, sometimes as a dumb prank, sometimes with genuinely disturbing stuff. People started calling it Zoom bombing. It got serious enough that the FBI actually put out a public warning about it. Google banned Zoom from work laptops, and it came out that Zoom had been calling their calls end-to-end encrypted, when technically that specific term didn't really apply to what they were doing. Lawsuit followed. None of that actually slowed the growth down, because what else were people going to use in the middle of a global lockdown? But it did crack the story a little. This wasn't just a feel-good pandemic miracle anymore. It was a company that got caught cutting corners at the exact moment the whole world had no choice but to trust it. Then the second hit came, and honestly, this one wasn't really Zoom's fault. It was just gravity. Vaccines rolled out, offices reopened, kids went back to school in person, and all that insane growth had nowhere to go except down, because it was never really organic in the first place. It was demand created by nobody having any other option, not demand created by Zoom being the obvious best choice long-term. You can see it clearly in the numbers. By mid-2022, revenue growth had slowed down to just 8% year over year. Still growth technically, but nothing close to what the stock price had been assuming. Shares had already lost over half their value that year alone. In February 2022, they laid off 1,300 people, about 15% of the company, and reported their first quarterly loss since 2018. Later that year, Zoom actually got kicked out of the NASDAQ 100 and replaced by DoorDash, which is a pretty blunt way for Wall Street to say, "We don't think you're the growth story anymore." But here's what I think people miss when they tell this story as pure disaster. Zoom's revenue never actually went negative. It kept growing every single quarter, just slowly. The company stayed profitable through this whole mess. This wasn't a company falling apart. It was a company that got priced like it would grow at pandemic speed forever, and the market just corrected that back down to something realistic. Painful if you own the stock. Not even close to the same thing as the business actually failing. By 2025, Zoom looks pretty different from either version of itself. Not the 2020 rocket ship, not the 2022 disaster headline either. Just a big, boring, profitable company. Over $4.7 billion in yearly revenue. Still holding around half the video conferencing market. Sitting on almost $8 billion in cash. Which is a weird place to end up after being the most talked about app on the planet for an entire year. Their whole pitch now is AI, because in 2026, every software company has to say that at some point, whether it's actually true or not, for them specifically. Zoom's version is called AI Companion, now on its third version, and the idea is your meetings basically write their own summaries and follow-up tasks without you doing anything after the call ends. 500,000 accounts had it turned on by early 2025. They're even selling it as its own paid add-on now, $10 a month, treating it like real revenue instead of just a free feature to make the product feel more modern. Whether that actually becomes Zoom's next real chapter or just this decade's version of the mandatory buzzword slide in every earnings call, I genuinely don't know yet. Nobody does. But I think there's something almost refreshing about Zoom's story compared to a lot of these other collapse stories we cover. It didn't really lie about what happened to it. For a few months in 2020, it actually was essential. Like genuinely, schools and hospitals and courts and even funerals ran through it because there was nothing else. It just turned out that being essential during one specific global emergency isn't the same as being permanently, structurally that big forever.